guys hear me back there? All right, so most of you work in mobile, so I don't need to tell you that mobile retention is notoriously difficult. But in case you didn't know, here are some dismal statistics to get you started. 22% of downloaded apps are opened just once. That's after the user has gone through the trouble of actually finding and downloading your app. 62% of an app's users typically churn after 1 month. So if I haven't met you yet, my name is Mariya Yao. I am the founder and creative director of a company called Xanadu. We are a design studio out in San Francisco, and we build simple and lovable products for mobile and web. We've worked with a range of companies from tiny one-person startups to multinationals with hundreds of millions of users. And in our experience, we've made many mistakes ourselves, and we've also seen a lot of bizarre mistakes. So today I'm going to talk to you about common mobile design fails and hopefully suggest some ways for you to fix them. So let's start just by reviewing a typical conversion funnel for an app. First, users need to be aware of your app. They hear about your app from a friend, they read about it in the news. Then, if they're interested, they look for it in the App Store. They download it, open it, hopefully register, take a key action such as making a purchase or inviting a friend, and then hopefully stick around. So there are two big areas of drop-off that typically happen for mobile apps. And they are between awareness and App Store search, and also between opening an app for the first time and then registering and taking some kind of critical action. Now, these are caused by two different kinds of mistakes. What I would call a strategic fail versus a tactical fail. And what I mean by that is a strategic fail is where you build a product, you announce it, nobody cares. Nobody wants your product. That's why there's such a drop-off between awareness and acquisition. The second kind of problem, which is the tactical fail, is where you build a product wrong. People actually want to use your app. They downloaded it, they opened it, and then something about your design really turned them off and they bounced. So I'm going to talk about both of them, but I want to emphasize that most companies spend their time debating details on a tactical level, like should our sign-up button be blue or green? What should the copy on our landing page be? But what I've seen is that most companies and most products fail, not necessarily because of tactical decisions, but because they didn't get the strategic decision right, where they're building the wrong product. So we're going to talk about both with a focus on the strategic. So a couple of the strategic fails I'm going to cover here. The very first one is missing the forest for the trees. This is one of my favorite graphs for demonstrating this point. So every year, a really big survey goes out to hundreds of app developers asking them, how do you decide what app to build, and how well did this app perform in the market? And so you'll see the very top bar is develop apps that I use. And it just so happens to be the most popular strategy. 50% of developers use that strategy either as their primary strategy or as one of their many strategies. And it turns out that it is the worst performing strategy from an average revenue per app per month. Instead, other strategies such as doing market research or taking successful business models in one country or one vertical and porting them to another tend to perform better. So the second strategic mistake I see a lot is trying to create new user behaviors rather than just replacing existing ones and building off of existing behavior. So a good example here is Foursquare versus Instagram. So for those who are not familiar with Foursquare, it's a location-based social networking app, and you use it. You pull out the app when you arrive at a venue, and you check in, which broadcasts your location to all of your friends. So Foursquare had some early success when it launched in 2009 with early adopter markets. But the problem is that checking in is not really a thing that normal people do. There's not a natural precedent for blasting your location to everyone at any given time. And so they actually struggled to get mainstream users to stick around. And instead, in 2012, Foursquare decided to pivot, and they decided to become more like Yelp and focus on explore rather than check-in. Because exploring is about local discovery, it's about figuring out what's around you, and that's something that normal people do all the time. So in contrast, prior to Instagram, 76% of people already use their phones to take photos. And then Instagram came in, and it made that process of taking a photo with your phone 10 times better. Your photos were more awesome because of the filters. The sharing was instant. You could push to Facebook right away, and they optimized for speed. And you got so many more likes and comments because of your beautiful photos. So the fact that Instagram was 10 times better than its nearest competitor it's quite important for the next strategic failure, which is, are you solving a problem or are you solving a nuisance? A lot of startups and product managers don't answer this question correctly. It's actually quite possible to be successful whether you're solving a problem or a nuisance, but there are some key differences in the strategy that you would use. So when users have an acute problem, they really feel the pain. They acknowledge the problem, they're looking for a solution, and they're willing to pay for incremental improvements, solutions that are maybe 10% better than the competitor. However, if you're building a product that doesn't really solve a problem, or maybe just addresses a nuisance, you pretty much need to be 10 times better. Otherwise, no one will pay attention. Because people don't have the mental resources and the capacity to break habits and adopt new products when it's really not a big deal for them. So a good example I like to use is Craigslist. A lot of us have used Craigslist. We all agree that it kind of sucks in many ways and it could be better. But for the most part, it kind of works. You find your apartment, you sell your furniture, it works okay. And so I've seen startup after startup come in and try to kill Craigslist with an incremental solution. It's like Craigslist, but marginally better design, or Craigslist with a little bit more social layer on top. It doesn't work. If you're not 10 times better when you're addressing a nuisance, you're probably not going to be successful. Another mistake I see is not sizing markets. So it happens frequently when a new product launches that they get some early traction with an early adopter market, and then they can't scale beyond that. So they never become mainstream, they can never become mass market. A lot of times niche products simply don't scale. And you would notice that if, instead of focusing on top-level market numbers, you actually did a lot of bottoms-up analysis to figure out exactly what that slice breakdown is of your targeted audience. The last big strategic mistake I see is building products that people like, but that don't really love, and then not being able to tell the difference between the two. So there are two really important questions that I like to ask if you have a product and you're not sure whether people like it or love it. The first question is, how would you feel if you couldn't use our product? The second question is, would you recommend us to your friends? So this first question was pioneered by a lot of lean startup advocates like Heaton Shaw and Sean Ellis, and it works like this. Let's think about your current product and service. If I were to ask you, how would your users feel if they couldn't use your product? Would you say that they were very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, not disappointed, or completely apathetic because they stopped using your product a long time ago? So it turns out Sean Ellis, who's a very well-known startup marketing guy, did research across hundreds of startups and products. And he found out that you want at least 40% of your users to answer that they would be very disappointed to give up your product or service. He found that businesses that did not reach this number struggled to be sustainable. So to review, the strategic fails are missing the forest for the trees, creating instead of replacing behaviors, trying to solve a nuisance with a 10% incremental solution, miscalculating your addressable market, and making a product that no one actually loves. But let's say, for example, that actually you have addressed these and you are building the right product. There's still a challenge because there's a major drop-off between opening an app for the first time and then registering or taking a key action. So let's explore some tactical failures that appear across a lot of mobile apps. The first one is taking before you give anything. And the biggest culprit of this is upfront registration. So forcing people to sign in with Facebook before you've demonstrated how your app works and why your app adds value will lead typically to between a 30 to 50% bounce rate. Instead, what you can do is what Tumblr does, which is the first screen you see shows snippets, a bit of a teaser in terms of the kind of content that's in the app. If I interact with the content and I try to engage with it, that's when Tumblr prompts me to register. Airbnb does something quite similar. Right from the get-go, I can browse different listings. I can choose a listing that I like. I can even go ahead and specify my booking details. And only when I am ready to book does Airbnb prompt me to log in or create an account. So another big tactical error is making people do work, extra work. And one of the biggest areas where this happens is in mobile forms. So as an example, we're going to talk about Uber versus Sidecar. And if you're not familiar, Uber and Sidecar are both taxi alternatives. You use them to call a cab when you can't hail a regular one. This is Sidecar's sign-up form. It's 13 fields, and it is so long that I have to scroll to see the entire thing. In contrast, this is Uber's sign-up form. Significantly fewer form fields, and also breaks the form into 3 manageable chunks. Additionally, it also has a little explanation as to why each form field is necessary. So let's imagine that it's Friday night, it's 2 a.m., you just got out of the bar, you had a few drinks, it's late, it's dark, you're tired, you want to go home, but everyone else is fighting you for a cab, so you try to use Uber or Sidecar. Which one of these forms do you think you're going to successfully fill out? Every extra form field that you add on a mobile screen is a possibility for error. If there's an error, then registration doesn't go through. Users get frustrated, they bounce. And if you think that form fields are fairly minor, lots of big companies such as Expedia have lost millions of dollars. In this particular case, Expedia had an extra form field on their checkout page. It confused people, and they entered in the wrong details, couldn't check out, and then bounced and went to a competitor. So form fields, just one form field can cost a lot of money. So the last topic is telling instead of showing. And this mistake happens most during the onboarding process. So many of you have probably seen like the page walkthroughs, paginated walkthroughs you'll get at the very beginning of an app. Here's an example of how not to do one. This is the first screen of Tempo. Tempo is an intelligent calendar that has a lot of cool features, but their onboarding process is maybe not so intelligent. So let's count how many screens they need to explain their app. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, not done yet, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 screens to teach you how to use a calendar. So this is obviously an egregious example, but we've done a lot of user studies across all kinds of paginated walkthroughs, and even if you have just 3 screens, users' memory of what's on those screens, the content on those screens, is typically less than 10% for a lot of reasons. One is that your short-term memory is extremely limited. You can really only remember 3 to 4 things at a time, and that's if you're focusing, which mobile users are usually not. Also, they tend to be impatient. You just downloaded an app, you want to play with it. You don't want to go and read a bunch of instructions just to figure out how the app works. So here's an example of how to do onboarding differently. Fantastical is also a calendar app. And what they do is they actually have an interactive tutorial. So they have this little blue dot that tells you what to push and why. And so you go and you walk through this 3-step tutorial, and you know immediately how to use this app, and it's done. So another common onboarding strategy is this. This is basically a Coachmark overlay. This particular app is Moleskine. Moleskine is known for their high-end designer sketchbooks, and this app is the sort of digital version of a sketchbook. If you have to go and label your UI, you're effectively admitting that your UI is an epic failure, that you didn't bother to put in the time to design an intuitive onboarding experience, and instead you decided that you would like flood your users with all sorts of information they're not going to use. So in contrast, this is Paper. Paper is also a sketchbook app. It's for iPad. And notice that there are no labels anywhere. What they do instead is they show you how the different tools work instead of labeling things and trying to tell you. So the key takeaway between Paper and also with Fantastical is that you should show, not tell. So to review the tactical failures, they are taking before you give, making people do extra work, such as filling in form fields they don't need to, and also telling instead of showing. Pushing people through really long tutorial screens instead of just showing them how the app works intuitively. So remember your tactical failures, but also keep in mind that strategic failures precede tactical failures. If you don't build the right product, you can't build the product right. So you want to make sure you keep in mind both of these possible mistakes. That's all I have for today, but I'm always interested in learning more about any particular design fails that you like or you think are illustrative. So you can go ahead and email me at Mariya@xanadumobile.com or tweet me at thinkmariya.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mariya.